I'll put it on you, boy.
So Terence Bud Crawford has just been stripped of the WBA world title within a week and a half of defeating Canelo Alvarez. And the way that a lot of these articles are titled, you'd probably be misled to believe that Terence Crawford is no longer the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. No way he's already been stripped of one of the 4 belts that he just won from Canelo. He hasn't agreed to rematch Canelo or anything. But when you read further, you will come to learn that Terence Crawford is still the undisputed super middleweight world champ. He got stripped of his WBA super welterweight title, the lone world title that he held going into his fight with Canelo. So that's fine then. Terence Crawford won that WBA super welterweight title off of Israel Madrimov over a year ago now. He hasn't made a single defense of that title since, and he is now a world champion in a different weight class. What business does he have still being a world champion at 154? And now, 1 month ago, the then WBA interim super welterweight champion Ennis put that interim title on the line against Abass Baraou. And in an exciting affair, Baral pulled off the upset and earned a unanimous decision to become the new WBA interim super welterweight champion. And now that Terence Crawford has just been stripped of the full WBA super welterweight title, Abass Baraou has been elevated to the full WBA super welterweight champion of the world. So yes, we have a new world champion in boxing in the form of Abass Baraou. Now, the one issue that people might take with Bud Crawford being stripped of his WBA super welterweight title is that off of the notion that Crawford skipped up to super middleweight to win the undisputed crown from Canelo in a super fight was a one-off mission in that weight class, and that Bud is too small to become a defending champion at 168, it would have made sense for Bud's next fight to actually be a defense of his title at 154, that being his WBA title. And Jerome Boots Ennis' upcoming fight with Wisma Lima on October 11th is actually a WBA eliminator in the super welterweight division. So surely Bud could have gone back down to 54 to defend his title against Boots. That would have been a massive fight, and a lot of people have been asking for that fight for a couple years, since Boots was Bud's IBF mandatory down at welterweight. But in the post-fight press conference after Bud Crawford defeated Canelo, Crawford was specifically asked if he would go back down to 54 to fight Boots, but Bud said no. He has no intention at all of moving back down to 154. So as much as we would have loved Boots versus Bud, if Bud has publicly expressed that he does not intend to go back down to super welterweight next, why hold up the division? It's only right that Baral got upgraded to full world champion. But this leads us to question the WBA and their consistency as a sanctioning body, because something similar is happening in a different weight class in which a WBA world champion is actually more inactive in the division that they are championing than Crawford has been at 154, and that is one Lamont Roach at 130, the super featherweight division. And much like the WBA had a newly crowned 154-pound interim champion in Abass Baraou, there was also a fairly newly crowned WBA interim champ at 130 in the form of Jazza Dickens. Lamont Roach last defended his WBA World Super Featherweight title in June of 2024. In March of 2025, he challenged for Tank Davis's WBA World title up at lightweight, and Roach got robbed when that fight was scored a draw. And Roach was meant to rematch Tank for the lightweight title, but when Tank went Ike Turner again, allegedly, that caused the Tank vs Roach rematch to fizzle out. And Tank did not reschedule a rematch with the man he had a controversial draw with, as he is now fighting Jake Paul instead. So much like Terence Crawford, Roach hasn't had a fight with his world title on the line for over a year. Roach also moved up in weight to challenge for another world title, and also much like Crawford publicly expressed that he's not interested in going back down to 154, Roach has also continually expressed his unwillingness to ever defend his WBA world title at super featherweight again. And now that the Tank rematch has fallen through, Roach is apparently going to be fighting Pitbull Cruz up at super lightweight, 140. So if the WBA want to strip Bud and upgrade Baraou at 154, why not strip Roach and upgrade Jazza Dickens at 130? Well, according to what I'm reading online, it seems like Bud Crawford directly told the WBA that he will not defend the title again, which is why he was stripped of the title. He officially informed them. He wasn't stripped because he said he didn't want to defend the title again in an interview or a press conference. But if that's the case, that he directly told the WBA that he won't defend the title again, then why is it reported that he's been stripped of the title and not that he's vacated it? Anyway, that doesn't matter. Crawford is no longer champ, Abass Baraou is now the full champion, and that's all that matters. Also, a possible major factor in Crawford being stripped here could be that he actually won world titles in another weight class. He was stripped after he beat Canelo for the titles. The WBA didn't strip him of the super welterweight strap merely for the Canelo fight being scheduled. So maybe if Roach actually got the nod against Tank and became champ at 135 and expressed a desire to stay at 135, then he would have been stripped of his 130-pound title. As for the WBA title scene at 130 pounds, much like Baral won the interim strap in a big upset win at 54, Jazza Dickens' win over Albert Batagaziev in July for the interim strap was also a big upset too. and now Dickens is set to defend his interim strap against Hayato Tatsumi on the Inoue undercard in December, and they are trying to push that Tatsumi kid as a star. So I reckon if Tatsumi beats Dickens for the interim belt, then the WBA would be more keen to strip Roach and elevate the would-be interim champ Tatsumi to the full champ at 130. Anyway, forget about 130. As for the 154-pound division, the division in question, what does this mean for Abass Baral going forward? Who will he first defend his full world title against? Well, Jerome Boots Ennis is ranked number 1 in the WBA super welterweight rankings. And as aforementioned, his upcoming fight with the number 9 ranked Wisma Lima is a title eliminator. I can't find anything officially calling this a final eliminator, but with Boots being ranked number 1, I'll assume that it is a final eliminator. Boots has of course never fought at 54 before, but he vacated his WBA welterweight title along with the IBF title to move up to 54, so I'm sure that has something to do with his number 1 position in the WBA rankings. The whole moving up in weight thing does usually work like that. Now let's be real, Boots is going to handily defeat Lima on October 11th, and if a win over Lima does indeed line up a shot at Baraou, then let's be real, Boots would probably smoke Abass Baral for his WBA World Super Welterweight title to ultimately become a 2-weight world champion. People will probably hate on Boots for having an easy route to a world title at 54 in that scenario. Most of us were just set on the Boots vs Virgil Ortiz Jr. fight happening next and just assumed that Boots' upcoming fight with Lima and Ortiz's upcoming fight with Lubin was to line up that Boots vs Ortiz fight now that Boots is officially at 54. But Virgil Ortiz did say in an interview that after the Lubin fight, he might have another fight lined up after that, which is not a Boots fight. Plus, Eddie Hearn seems to be quite set on Boots going the WBA route, so to speak. So I guess Boots vs Ortiz will not be next. Of course, Ortiz is the WBC interim champ, so hopefully he gets a shot at the winner of Sebastian Fondora vs Keith Thurman for the full WBC title if he gets past Lubin, of course. And then if Boots beats Lima, then wins the WBA belt from Baraou, Boots vs Ortiz could potentially be a world title unification by the end of next year. It's not that simple, of course, a lot has to happen for that to go down, but that would be big, wouldn't it? As for Bud Crawford, what's next for him then? There are so many variables, aren't there? Will he defend his super middleweight titles against a super middleweight contender? Will he rematch Canelo? Will he move down to middleweight to take on unified champ Janabek in order to try and become a 6-weight world champion? Or will he never box again? Well, all we know now is that the variable of him moving back down to defend his super welterweight title is now out of the window. Man, I would have loved Bud versus Boots at 54, but we've just learnt that that will not be happening. And quickly just to note, that Tank Davis versus Jake Paul presser, that was bad. You can pick apart a lot of things about that press conference which galvanizes how much of an utter joke this fight is. I've already done a pre-fight video on this fight which I'll link at the top of the description, and there are more things to say now based off that presser, but I kind of want to ignore this fight's existence from here on. Not gonna lie, I didn't actually watch Jake Paul's last fight with Chavez Jr. live, and I'm yet to watch a full fight replay still to this day. But I'm not saying that to sound all hardcore like, oh yeah, I don't need to watch Jake Paul fights, because Zurdo Ramirez defended his unified cruiserweight world titles on the co-main event of that card, and I've still seen nothing but short highlights of that world title fight that happened like 3 months ago. And of course there's a certain other fight on that undercard that I did a lengthy pre-fight video about, but we needn't go into that. I'm probably going to watch that Zurdo Ramirez vs Junior Dorticos fight in full for the first time right after uploading this video because I'm trying to do a little piece on the cruiserweight division next. And as for Jake versus Chavez, I mean, I've heard certain things about that fight in regards to Chavez holding back his punches and stuff, so I guess I'll find the time to watch that in full at some point between now and the Tank versus Jake fight. Anyway, let me keep this one brief and end it here. You guys let me know your thoughts on the world title scene at 154 now that Baral has been upgraded to full champ. Like and subscribe, and you have been listening to O.M.E Boxing.